Hello, everybody. This is the Pick Six Podcast with Sam McKewon, Jimmy Watkins. I'm Evan Bland on another close to triple-digit August weekday. How's everybody doing?
We haven't had the whole crew here for a while, right? Like last week it was just me and Sam. Then I was gone for like 2 weeks of the show. It feels good. It feels familiar. It's good.
Yeah. Yes. I'm thrilled to be here. I am tired of the heat. School's starting up. Your oldest is going to kindergarten, right?
Kindergarten, yeah.
What day does that start?
Next Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My kids go back on Monday. My daughter's first day of high school.
Oh.
Yeah. That's a big deal.
It's about to get mean.
That's no joke. Junior high's pretty mean.
It's true.
Yeah.
Meaner. I think high school is just, I don't know, the stakes are higher or they feel higher. In reality, the crazy, I'm just sort of processing this now because my brain has now evolved from that stage. But just like the number of things of just random memories I have, it's like, man, I was really bent out of shape about that. And that just doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
And you just can't make 14 to 18-year-olds understand that. I wish you could, though.
At least with high school, you sort of have at least a little bit better idea of who you are or what you like to do or what group of people you want to be a part of. At least that's my general experience. Middle school is a total free-for-all.
Yeah.
You have no idea. I mean, you're figuring things out.
Okay, but there's a purity to that, though, because there's more intersection of what will be clicks, but people don't understand who's cool and who's not cool yet.
Then in high school,
maybe
high school, you really separate yourself.
Nothing a big platter of fries
or you don't.
Paninis wouldn't solve.
Right. Sam, okay, Sam. So there's a bar and grill in Willoughby, Ohio, my hometown, called Panini's that Sam has incidentally been to.
Yeah.
And very much enjoys or sarcastically enjoys. I don't know.
It was fine.
Yeah. He was really, really into the idea that he knew what Panini's was, and I knew what Panini's was when I first got there. Panini's is great. My best friend's sister worked at Panini's for a summer.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys could connect in that way.
So I'm able to bring,
great.
anytime he goes back home to Cleveland, I say, tell Panini's hello. Sometimes he's not in Cleveland, so I'm like, wave at Panini's, whatever you need to do. But I've been there, so that's a connection that he and I have.
That's good.
It is. It's deep, and I'm sure, again, there were many times you'd go to Panini's after high school, after a tough day at high school.
It is.
I've driven by his high school. That's very strange.
Incidentally, my high school is located about 1,000 feet from Panini's.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so it's very odd to have driven by a high school of a person who lives 1,000 miles away from you or grew up 1,000. That's just strange. And, of course, my daughter's going to the same high school you went to. Like in
Southeast.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's been an interesting August. It's been very busy. A lot of football, a lot of compressed time. I think when you start a season on the road and you start at week 0, everything feels really fast. And that's how it's felt, I think, throughout camp. If, for example, Nebraska was starting its season on September 3rd at home, I think this podcast would have a very different feel. It would just be like, first week, second week of camp. Everybody's kind of settling in. That's what most college football teams do. Not Nebraska. No. 2 different years they've agreed to go to Ireland, and it has created a week 0 situation for them that is a kind of must-win. And so it's compressed and changed our realities, too.
Well, you think about it. They haven't had a normal opener since, 2019. I mean...
Since South Alabama in 2019.
I mean, you go to Ohio State in October to open the COVID year in 2020, and you have the weird week 0 at Illinois last year, and now
in 2018 they got a canceled game.
Right.
Like, they have had virtually no breaks as it records in normality. That said, I do feel like the vibe in camp hasn't been annoyed. Last year they were flat out annoyed at the NCAA stuff, at Trev taking over. There was a lot of moving parts. I haven't sensed annoyed. I don't know if you guys have, but I haven't sensed that. And I actually kind of sense they're having a little bit of fun.
Well, there's a sense of newness to it. I think last year, you spend enough time around anybody, it's going to get old, and you're going to want to, whatever the version of the season is, you just want to get there.
That was the run-it-back season.
Yeah, everyone kind of knows what the deal is. You just want to get to it. This is what we came here to play football. We didn't come here to be in fall camp, right? This year, there's so much newness that you need this fall camp. You need this time to gel, and there's a novelty to it, right? Like there's just
I almost got a sense of relief to the feeling. Like finally you can stop, or at least put to the side conversations about NIL and realignment and who's coming and going and the pressure, and just like talk football, right? Talk schemes, talk depth chart, like stuff that's familiar that people can lean back on. I don't know. I just felt like that was something that has been good for Nebraska. So I thought maybe a good way to frame the conversation for this podcast, we've had a couple open practice sessions now where we've had 30 to 40 minutes to see different drills and coaches and players interact. We've had a handful of post games or post practice availabilities now. Nebraska's been through more than a dozen of these fall camp sessions. Let's sort of lay out some things maybe that you've noticed that affect your perception of Nebraska, good or bad or whatever, for the upcoming season.
A lot of leadership talk this fall, huh? Yesterday we had Casey Thompson saying we need more voices on the offensive side and making a point to say the defense has significantly more voices on their side of the ball. Mickey Joseph saying after a bad day for the receivers last week, waiting for somebody to take that baton and run with it. Travis Fisher. This all makes sense. Travis Fisher was talking about, Quinn Newsome got to know where all the new guys are, right? This all makes sense because a lot of turnover, a lot of multi-year starters left the program last year. But it's important because, let me tell you why leadership is important. Great podcast topic, but
by Jimmy Watkins.
It's important because I've been saying for what feels like months now that we won't really know. Like the true test of this team is going to be what happens when you fall behind 10-0. What happens because there's been this sense of like waiting for the other shoe to drop in the program the last few years. What happens because the offense was so antsy, like, oh my God, we're down 10-0, we can't run the ball, blah, 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 blah. And now we're hoping that maybe that changes with the new offensive coordinator, new philosophy, new pieces in place, right? So what happens when you're down 10-0? Are you going to stay calm? I think that's why that sort of stuff matters. The leadership piece of it, adversity hasn't hit them yet, right? Okay, yesterday they had a rough day in camp. It's not the same as, if let's say it happens in Ireland, like they're supposed to beat Northwestern by multiple scores. If you fall behind 10-0, it might feel like the world is falling apart, and that's when it's really important for anybody, please, to gather guys around and say, hey, breathe. We're okay. So I'm just interested to see how that stuff shakes out. It's insanely cliche to talk about leadership ahead of a team that has a bunch of new starters in there, but it matters. It's a talking point for a reason.
I think they've got a leader, Evan. I think it's Casey Thompson. I think the challenge there, though, is that Casey probably doesn't know a lot of the players as well as Chuba Purdy does because he didn't throw all the time in the summer and he was on a pitch count, as he said. And I think the other thing is that Casey Thompson just has a different leadership style that I would have described as more at home in 1995 than now. I think he's first of all, he's very verbal. And by that, I'm a very verbal person. Like, he's just a verbal leader. Like, he can actually talk about leadership and not just be the leader by example. So I think he's got the ability to communicate with people. I think he can talk at length about what leadership looks like. He talked at length about things yesterday. He had a 16-minute press conference or something around that time. And so I think that is an adjustment for a lot of players who probably haven't necessarily, especially on offense, maybe just haven't been around it that much. They just haven't experienced a quarterback either at Nebraska or in general, who's just like that. And so I think there's an adjustment that's having to go on. And part of the challenge here is okay, there's a sense within the program, hey, this Chuba Purdy is pretty good. Like, he could end up being a pretty good quarterback. Now that we can see what he can do, yeah, he can run, he can do some things. He kind of looks a little bit like Adrian, and he does. He's got a little bit of the same skill set. Simultaneously, you got to win now. And if you put Chubb out there right away, there's a chance that he's not going to play great, and he's gonna struggle against Big Ten defenses. And so you've got to try to ride Casey Thompson at this point. And Casey and you wrote a beautiful story about him. Casey's a very specific person. He's not like Adrian Martinez, and I mean that in good ways. Like, he's just not like that. You know, Casey insists himself a little bit, as most good leaders do, and I think they're adjusting to it. I think on the defensive side of the ball, there's really no adjustment to be made because Garrett Nelson has been Garrett Nelson since the minute Garrett Nelson came into the program in 2019, and so they're used to Garrett Nelson. I think Garrett can be a little much. I think the comments he made at Big Ten Media Days, a little much. But they know him as a little much. And they're used to that. Casey, they're not used to this. And so I think he's the leader. I think he's just going to have to assert it. And part of what I think Whipple was saying yesterday is, I don't get you until you come over to the sidelines. I need the quarterbacks to be able to get this thing together. I think Casey's got to earn the trust of his teammates, and I think Chubba's got to speak up. I think Chubba's got to be more assertive. And be in a quarterback battle, because I think to some degree there's a sense of, well, it's Casey's job, and I'll just sit over here and wait until it's my turn to come in and try to run the ball. And I think Chubba's got to be more assertive, because I think there's a potential that he could be a really good quarterback, and he's got to keep coming along, and the leadership component is another piece of that.
Do you think is it cultural or coincidental that it feels like under Frost the defensive leadership has been consistently strong, and the offensive leadership has been lacking? It's been, you think about the captains that Nebraska's had over the years, former on the offensive side, former walk-on, kind of a soft-spoken lineman who stepped into the role, Martinez, like you said. And then you think about defensively. I mean, they've had guys like Muhammad Berry, all the guys that
Colin
you're talking
Miller
about now. Colin Miller was really
Garrett
good.
Nelson cites Colin Miller as the template.
So, like, do you think is that a coincidence? Is that recruiting? Is that
I think
the fact
part
that
of
your
it is
head
a
coach is on that
byproduct.
side of the ball?
Part of it is a byproduct of defense tends to have that sort of, as the coaches would say, dog mentality. Defenses tend to have those guys on that side of the ball who are just vocal and angry, because you have to communicate really well on defense to know where everybody's going, and so it's just natural. On offense, the quarterback is a leader. It's the bottom line. And there are times when your program doesn't feel like it has as good a leadership on that side of the ball when the quarterback is not, a jerk. Mm-hmm. You've got somebody on the offensive side of the ball has to be a jerk. And typically, the person who's empowered to be that is the quarterback. For what it's worth, I think Luke McCaffrey actually had some of that, but there were reasons that Luke didn't work. But I think some of it is you have to have everybody kind of expects the quarterback to be that person sooner or later. Best quarterback in Nebraska football history was a jerk. Everybody admits it. He admits it. But he was a great leader because people knew that Tommy Frazier did a great job of setting the expectations around everybody, and then he performed to a level that was higher than all of them. That's what makes a great quarterback. Casey Thompson will set all the expectations. Will he perform? But that's the reason. I think Adrian Martinez leadership was a journey with him. He was a captain for 3 years. And again, I think Adrian wasn't a bad leader, but I think he was a very different kind of leader than Casey's going to be. I mean, you've interviewed them both. It's obvious that they're different people, like vastly different people, personality-wise.
Well, I remember early on in Adrian's time here, we had a conversation about how the next step for him was just to talk about his teammates in a way that was like thoughtful and expounded on things. And Casey Thompson, that comes a lot more natural to him. Yeah. And I thought what Casey said yesterday was
his dad was a quarterback too.
He had a lot of interesting things to say yesterday, just about he believes leadership is innate. That you don't have to necessarily be in these low moments where you have to rally guys. Like, you can do that in the positive moments too. Mm-hmm. Like, this is clearly the sort of topic that he's thought about, that he's worked on, as opposed to just asking a guy, what do you think about leadership? Well, and you kind of make something up. I mean, he's, as we saw, like, he's a very thoughtful person. And he said it too. It's not just about being able to execute, but how can you articulate it to someone else, and how can you articulate that in the right moment? And I think he has a good sense, a good maybe sixth sense about when to do that.
His head coach has had a hard spot too, because his head coach followed Tommy Frazier as a player, and Scott was not a captain. Like, and this isn't to say that Scott wasn't a good leader, because I think in '97 he was. But I wouldn't necessarily have described Scott Frost as the verbal leader on the '97 team. I remember the guys on '97's team. I was there in college. And I just think Scott understands when an Adrian Martinez comes along and is maybe a little different of a leader. Casey Thompson is in that type A alpha persona. If the teammates around him trust him, he can be their leader. And they don't need a bunch of other leaders. He can be that. It's just a question of whether he can perform up to the standards and whether they feel like they have his trust and his admiration.
How far do you feel like you have to go back in Nebraska starting quarterbacks to have a guy comparable to that?
Tommy.
You would go all the way back to Tommy?
Tommy Armstrong.
Oh, Armstrong, okay.
All right. Tommy Armstrong. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Tommy had that.
All right.
Tommy was a leader. No, Tommy was imperfect. I think Tanner Lee had some of that quality, but no, Tommy. Absolutely Tommy. Tommy Armstrong was an absolute alpha, get after people. Everybody knew who was in charge. And you know what? We were tough on Tommy when he was there, and there were reasons at times to be tough on Tommy Armstrong. But dude beat Michigan State. He beat Oregon. And that's something that, Adrian never did. And I remember those games. And like Tommy willed the team to wins because he was Tommy. And they haven't really had that vibe since he left. And with Thompson, they actually do. I just don't know if they're going to follow him.
I think there's another simpler reason for the difference between the leadership of offense and defense. The offense has changed coaching leaders on average, every 18 months since Frost has been here?
There's been some turnover,
yeah. The defense has had one guy at every position except for defensive line the entire time, which means it's not always, systems change and evolve over the time, but everyone's speaking the same language. Everyone's guys who have been there for 3-4 years under Eric Chenander, they have an infinitely wider base of knowledge and experience to speak from than a guy, even Adrian Martinez, who was there for 4 years. It's a different language, or doing things a little bit differently. Scott was obviously always the orchestrator, had his hands heavily involved in the offense, but everything I think leadership requires confidence, and confidence requires preparation, and just by virtue of counting days, they had fewer days of preparation in some of the different offensive systems that they were running, or different tweaks that came with different coordinators than defensive guys did.
That's a really good point. I think when you're constantly having to change what you're learning, the leaders are most likely going to be and I say this as a blowhard, are usually going to be the people who would be verbal anyway. Mm-hmm. The people who don't know half a shit about anything and still talk when you're constantly learning new things. Casey is not that. He actually is so prepared that I think he has confidence because he lives his life almost monastically, like he's a football monk. And so, I don't think Casey ever feels unprepared, and I think that the confidence comes to some degree from that. That's a great point, though.
Yeah, to Casey's point,
Casey's
point, wanting more voices on the offense, there's a reason for that. Everyone's got a new thing going on, and except for the tight ends. Where'd the other guy come from? Oh, it's Travis Vokalek.
You got a hell of a
guy
point.
who's had the same coach since he's been here.
Yes, the Nebraska's defense, the secondary had 5 coaches in 4 years, and that group was defeated.
That was a mess
at the end of 2017. It's a great point, and it's very true. They do have a leader in Casey Thompson. You don't have to sit around and listen to him for a long time. He's got the ability. The question is, will they follow him?
What else, guys? What's another observation that you've taken from watching or from listening to coaches and players in camp?
I think another thing Casey said yesterday. Evan and I were walking up to the press box after doing our video yesterday, and we were just talking about, offense kind of had a rough day today. And Evan goes, I think the offensive line had a rough day today. I was like, why'd you say that? Then I went back and watched the entire Casey Thompson press conference. And he said, he was talking about why guys were maybe dragging a little bit yesterday. And he mentioned, well, it's not that hot out here for me. Last year at this time I was practicing at 115-degree heat in Austin, Texas. I'm not 300 pounds, though. I'm not an offensive lineman. And that's just that's saying something without saying something, right? That's I think where Evan's observation came from about maybe it was the offensive line that had a rough day yesterday, and that just further illuminates the questions that we already had about the offensive line. Also this thing about Turner Corcoran being such a key piece, like Turner Corcoran he was at practice yesterday, like he was taking the snaps during the individual drills for the offensive linemen. But Turner Corcoran's presence being absence being this huge missing piece, that to me just suggests more unsteadiness with the offensive line. Not necessarily that it's going to be bad or things look terrible, but unsteady ground. That's a takeaway that I had from yesterday.
Sometimes it's like what's not said, and what we haven't heard a lot about is the offensive line, really. I mean, we haven't. First of all, Donovan Rail is one of the only, maybe the only assistant who we haven't heard from.
He is. He didn't have time.
I know, and maybe that's circumstantial, but like you said, Corcoran's out. There hasn't been a lot of talk about Ben Hart or the center position. I think that the handful of times we've asked players about the O-line, they're like, a lot of combinations.
And I was trying yesterday. They had Teddy Prohaska out there yesterday. I was asking anything, and he's feeling, we're all good. We got 3 guys who could fill in at guard or tackle or whatever. Like details are the enemy.
And you hear about practice about how the offense has had a bad day, and usually that means the defense generated a pass rush of some kind, which, again, is that a good thing for Nebraska or is that a bad thing for Nebraska? But I think consistently with what we know about how that line continues to be reshuffled, it's a spot we knew was a concern going in, and I think it's confirmed that and maybe added to that.
Oh,
we have a special guest
Tom
here.
Chatel's here.
Tom Shatel has joined the group.
I just came in to be the waving arms in the end zone behind the basket. I didn't mean to be on the air, so...
Well, you are.
I came in to totally throw you guys off your game, but that's impossible to do. So
we're old pros at this point. Tom, do you have an offensive line take about what Casey Thompson said yesterday?
I know they should just. And I'm not saying they're not being honest about it, but nobody expects it to be a great line. They expect it to be the what's the old saying? Work in progress. It's going to take a while. This whole offense is going to take a while. Anybody expects them to show up in Ireland and be on top of their A game, I don't see it happening. Now it might, but Scott Frost even said, "Well, I love the fact that there's all these guys that can play all these different positions." Well, that's maybe not what we're wanting to hear, but if he's good with it, we're good with it, I guess. I don't know. I just. Donovan's got he's got 1 week left to talk.
Well, that's a great point, though, Tom. You talk about
Scott Frost. We might as well talk to Scott about the offensive line.
I know.
You talk about expectation, though. Like, what do you think the expectation should be for this group?
For the offensive line?
Yeah, for this offensive line.
I think it's going to take a whole year to figure it. The offensive line is the hardest thing to get to. There's so much synchronicity that has to take place. That's a big word, but there's so much that has to take place. These guys have to be on the same page. They make calls. They do their own audibles at the line. The center is the most important guy.
Good thing we know a whole lot about who that's going to be.
Well, I mean,
I think we do.
Well, okay, but
But I think it's going to take a while.
Mean.
So I think it's not perfect. Nobody should panic. It's going to take a while. It may take all year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we knew. We don't know. We don't know these guys haven't been on the field together, not for a whole season.
Probably time to call a '90s Husker and ask him.
Well, do we know any of those?
I think we do. Well, we got to. I mean, Donovan Rail is not the. There's no. We put too much on those guys. Nebraska had the best offensive line coach in maybe the history of the sport for many, many years, and then since then, I think they've had one really good one, and then they've had some other guys, and we put way too much on their solving any problems. Like Donovan Rail is here to do what Scott Frost wants him to do. Scott Frost said that last Friday, whatever day it was, and it doesn't matter what he says. Like, I'm not trying to be rude to the guy. I don't think he wants to talk that much. So, like, at the end of the day, Rail is going to do what he's going to do. We've watched him coach 2 different times. I think he's a pretty good coach. Like, he talks to the guys. He's teaching them. He's not just standing there and not saying anything like he does to us. He's doing what he's hired to do. He's really not hired to talk to us. And I'm not saying I don't want to talk to him. I'm just saying that, like, the Nebraska media has had the tendency to put a lot of meaning into that position. And outside of the time that Barney Cotton was the offensive line coach, because he was sort of the co-coordinator, they just wouldn't say it. I don't know that we, Mike Cavanaugh, I got tired of him. I did. I stopped interviewing him because he didn't say very much, and he was kind of in a grumpy mood most of the time. So he'd be like, how's this guy doing? Pretty good. I'm like, okay, you know what? Whatever you're here to do, you do that. You're not being insightful. I'm going to stop talking.
But Sam, don't you think?
And Rayola's going to be kind of the same way, and that's okay. Yeah. Like, at the end of the day, the offensive line coach does not solve. If he was that important, he wouldn't be the lowest paid coach on the roster.
He's also the least experienced coach on the roster.
Well, that's my point. Is they would have went out and hired.
I would say okay, but
Bob Bostad, if it was going to be that crucial.
In the NFL,
it is crucial. It's the most important position on the team.
But my point is that Scott Frost is clearly doing something.
In the
that.
NFL, I agree with you, but in college, is it not like most of these guys come from high school? They get chosen because they're big and athletic,
sure,
and then it's your job to mold them. I would argue that it's the offensive line coach has a decent amount of control over what happens there.
He has control. B, it's pretty clear that he was hired by Scott Frost to do what Scott wanted him to do. So they didn't go out and hire a $600,000 a year offensive line coach to have his own ideas. They hired a guy to come in and do what Scott wants. That's okay. I'm just saying that, like, I don't want to put a lot of pressure on that guy. Like, he's not Bob Diaco. Like, people...
I don't think anybody's putting pressure on him, are we?
I think there's just a byproduct of pressure.
What's he going to say, and how's he going to... I don't know. I mean, he's going to say whatever he's going to say. But, like, I don't look back at the Mike Riley years and go, if only Mike Cavanaugh had been better. Like, I think it comes down to... This is kind of what Scott wants, and this is, we can talk, and Scott's kind of responsible for it because they went and made a hire that you wouldn't necessarily make. They made it. We watched him in practice. I thought he seemed okay.
Yeah, I thought it was instructive.
Seeing
him in practice.
But what we're saying is there's a lot of questions about the offensive line. It'd be nice to have the coach come up and just answer them, and maybe he will next week, and that's fine. I'm not complaining about it. It's just an observation.
Oh, I know.
That we have a lot of questions. There's a lot of mystery. Maybe he could clear some of that up. But you know what? It's August 10th or whatever, and maybe he can't, and that's fine too.
I'm just saying if it doesn't go well with the offensive line, I don't. It's not my inclination to put that on him.
Yeah, I just think that there's a lot of
head coach.
There's a lot of pressure on the offensive line, and as a byproduct of that, there's a lot of pressure on the offensive line coach.
Like, if for whatever reason, I don't think this is going to be true, but if Nebraska's defense really busts this year, I guess I can say, well, that's on Scott, but kind of isn't. It's kind of on the guy that the guy, it would be on Chenander. We would say, what's going on there? If the offensive line isn't playing well, I'm not going to say, well, Donovan Raiola. If only he had.
Right, because we knew it's on shaky ground coming in.
Yeah, because I just don't, he's going to talk to us the one time, and it's probably not going to be much. And
so who does it fall on? Whipple? Frost?
At least those two, yeah.
I don't remember what we started talking about.
I don't either. We just made the observation that we'd like the
O-line being troublesome.
No, I think there's just, it's like, okay, well, so the team is going to rise and fall. If this is the way I understand. The offense will rise and fall on the offensive line.
Yes.
The team will rise and fall on the offensive line.
To some degree.
Okay, that's fine. If that's true, then they hired a guy who's really new to the role and has never been a full-time college assistant over other people they could have hired who have more experience.
Right.
When that happens, well, that guy's doing it for the first time. You say, okay, the head coach. Whereas if the defense, for whatever reason, were to fall apart, it's kind of Scott, but you'd also go, this guy's been here for 5 years. But he's responsible more.
If you were to let's say it doesn't work, the offensive line's not very good, and we're talking about why did Scott Frost not invest more into the offensive line? We're asking why he didn't hire someone better at coaching offensive line.
I don't know that guy's going to.
That's what we're asking there.
I think there's a limited. Here's what I would say: is that Nebraska's had offensive line coaches who were more than that, and I think Tom could tell you this. Milt Tenopir was more than an offensive line coach. He designed their run game. Barney Cotton was more than an offensive line coach. He obviously was. He was an offensive coordinator / head coach in an offensive line coach's body. I think Donovan Rail is coming here and being asked to work a bunch of guys at different spots. I'm just saying it's a different context. And we have a tendency to compare everyone who comes along to Milt, and Milt could have been a head coach at like 30 schools. And he just decided that's not what he wanted to do.
We just want the guy to be coaching them to do whatever Scott wants them to do. We want them to be good at coaching that. I'm not asking the designer. Okay.
I mean, what I wanted to go and watch him do was like, is he going to coach the offensive line, or is he going to sit there and he doesn't do that?
He has detailed feedback after
very
every
good.
rep. Rep.
He's very vocal.
So I'm not
there.
sure. Like, I think that guy's probably doing his job.
But like, what's the difference between him and like the $1 million a year O-line coach, whoever that is? Like, how would you know the difference if that person was on Nebraska's roster this year, on their staff this year?
It's all performance based.
Because the players are the players. It's not something in 1 year that you can reinvent.
My
right?
hunch is that person would probably have more input in what you were doing. I think there was a sense of, with Greg Austin, he's the run game coordinator. What was his title?
Yeah, run game coordinator, yeah.
You're going to have more input in the strategy. Like, we're going to do this, we're not going to do this. I think Donovan is there to, I think if you're in an offensive meeting room, this is just my hunch. I don't know this, so I guess I'm speaking out my rear end a little bit. My hunch is that Mickey Joseph has a bigger
natural
voice.
leader.
I'm just guessing he has a voice in that room, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's an associate.
He's got more experience.
Right. So, like.
So does Whipple. The one guy who didn't fit the hires was Rayola.
Right.
Because he didn't have the experience.
So that's what I mean. Is it like, when you get in the offensive meeting room, I sure as hell would want to know what Mickey Joseph
really good,
thinks.
but he better be good fast.
He might.
It's going to have to happen, and that's what we're just. Nobody's putting pressure on the guy.
Kind of.
But I'm saying he's not experienced, and
Right.
he's got a bunch of guys who have never played together.
To Tom's point,
it's going to not be perfect.
we're not putting pressure on him that didn't already exist. We're just talking about the pressure that already exists.
Oh, totally agree.
Yeah.
But, like, for example, when Mike Cavanaugh was here, what did he always talk about? The best five, the best five, the best five. We're only going to play five. Remember the big arguments we used to have about that? Well, Mike Riley let him decide that. Like, it wasn't like Mike Riley didn't go over there and go, best five, Mike. No. He was like, Cav, best five. No. That was Cavanaugh's idea.
Right.
Scott Frost has basically told Donovan Rail, I want you to move these guys around, and I want you to. I mean, Rail is doing what he's told.
I like Cav. He's kind of a character. I know you didn't like him, but but the bottom line is they have not made the offensive line a priority since Milt. They just haven't. They haven't. Callahan, Pelini, right? All of them.
I'm not going to disagree with that.
Should be the priority on this program. It hadn't been. It has not been taken care of the way it should be, and therefore you go into the Big Ten and boom, you fall on your face.
That's truth.
And so
yes.
I don't know that Scott has made this a priority by hiring it, but maybe he did. Maybe that if you're Trevor Alberts, you're going, okay, I like the staff, I like Rayola. You got him extra time because this guy might blossom in a couple of years. He might be the guy, but they don't have that much time. They don't have that kind of luxury.
Who knew we were going to have this? This is actually good, though. This is exactly what we're. I mean, this is the crux of the issue,
and it manifests in the NFL. Think about how many linemen from Nebraska had so careers, and then they went on to have great long NFL careers.
And
the last 10 years, 15
this isn't
years.
necessarily fair to Rayola. I think he may be a very good coach, a guy with a great future. But how much of it was they wanted the nephew or the quarterback?
Let's go.
How much of it was that?
I hope it wasn't any of it, but that's a hell of a question.
You would hope not.
I don't think they would say it was any of it, but at the end of the day, here's what
Uncle
I mean.
Donnie.
We went to practice, and honestly, I think Donovan Rail he's been pretty good.
I agree.
Like I mean, he's not very good to us. But when you watch him, I'm like, this guy's really.
I was struck enough by it yesterday to actually ask Teddy Prohaska about it, and Teddy said that he's a really good communicator, and I agree from watching him.
They may have hired a great offensive line coach, but I just hope he has time to show us because
I get it.
Yeah.
there's not going to be time if they don't
Yeah.
win. So
That's a good point.
But yeah, I think this is. We were all saying hire an experienced guy. There's a lot of old gray beards out there, but Scott saw through that, and for whatever reason, and he thinks, and Donovan's Wisconsin guy, Wisconsin offensive lines, you can't beat them. So it's on paper, it makes a lot of sense. But here's my question, and I should be asking Scott Frost, not you, but Scott said, well, Donovan's doing it the way I wanted to do it. Well, why wasn't Austin doing it the way you? Because you're in charge.
Well,
we're firing off the ball now. Well, where was that?
That's fair. That's all. I mean, and I think everyone in this room has been a leader in some context in their life. Have you, Jimmy? Have you led anything?
I don't know. My mom was the coach of my first basketball team, so I probably was given too much.
Okay.
My wife won't let me.
Too much leeway there.
Well, I think you've been a leader in this in this office and just in other ways too. You've been the president of writers associations, whether the basketball writers or football writers. So there's always a give and take. So you can't just dogmatically say everything's going to be like this unless you feel like you've got a bunch of yes people. Part of what I think Scott did is he traded out some of the yes man stuff on the play calling and on the strategy and on some of the past concepts to Whipple. He just traded it out. I think he traded in, I'm going to do more with this offensive line because I think the thinking is it doesn't matter what plays we call. If we can't run the football and actually get downhill and run the football at people, we aren't going to win games no matter what plays I call. So I think he traded out some of that and gave that to Whipple and traded in, I am going to go down to that offensive line. I am going to hire somebody who will do what I tell them to do, and we're going to run the ball the way I want us to run the ball. And I'm not going to have a $700,000 offensive line coach who looks at me and says, "I make $700,000. I'm not here to do what you want me to do." Does it make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and I think that's great.
It's like the GA reporter at the paper. You're going to do what I tell you to do. It's not on you.
Scott Frost has a wide range of credentials. I mean, he's been a defensive coordinator. He's played special teams. To me, though, the one area that maybe he doesn't have experience as a player or a coach would be on an offensive line. So that, to me, is intriguing. You know what I'm saying?
I think the light bulb, of course, but he was there when it was a priority. He was there when all these things were playing the right way, special teams.
Right.
It was all priority. So he knows the formula. That's why he was hired. He knows he's got the codes. I go back to what my old buddy Matt Hoskinson, the former O-line guy, told me, and I wrote it, and he said it, and he said when Frost was hired, and he and Frost are good buddies. He told Frost, you better have a kick-ass offensive line in this league and defensive line, or don't even bother showing up. And he said, Scott told him, my scheme is so good, we can have an average offense. We don't have to have a great offensive line because of the scheme. And Haas just shook his head and said, you're going to find out. And so that's sort of Scott's mentality coming into this. And maybe the light bulb has come on. He gets it now. 4 years in the Big Ten, bam, 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 bam. Mm-hmm. And so, and to be honest, their offensive line has been better. The physicality of this program has been better. They don't get dominated the way they did the first couple of years. Last couple of years, they matched Iowa and Wisconsin head on. I'm here to tell you that they have matched them. They just don't have the little finer details, special teams, the turnovers, the quarterback play you need to win those games. But up front, Iowa does not dominate the game like they did before. And that's a credit to the defensive line as well. So I think he gets it. The light bulb has come on. And if he's in charge of offensive line, bravo. I say bravo.
Did we just solve the Nebraska football Rubik's Cube right here? With this impromptu podcast segment?
Yeah, hopefully.
I'm gonna get out of here.
Why?
I'm too much-
No way.
too much
You
of a
can sit down.
distraction.
This
Tom.
was
I was
good.
gonna
Too much
offer
of
you
a
my seat.
distraction.
I'll
No,
sit.
no,
I'll
no.
stand up with
I'll
you.
probably have a radio show or something.
The greatest
Probably
distraction
help me.
we could have had.
No, like I mean, again, like I'm
Seriously, you want to sit?
No, I do
curious.
not.
I'm
I
just.
just wanted to come in, Allen Fieldhouse.
It's
wave
good.
my arms.
The pot has been stirred.
No, I'm,
Good. No, good way.
I mean, I
good
think-
way. This is good. I
and
didn't mean that
it's not
direct.
like I didn't like Mike Kavanaugh, but there's no answers. Like, who cares? Okay,
He was.
whatever you want to say, man. Like, there comes a point, and it got this way last year with Mario Verduzco. Like, the last time he came up, he's talking about cats and guns, and I'm like, you know what?
I would look over and
You don't have any
you'd
answers.
throw up your hands
You
and
don't-
walk away.
You know what? It's okay. You don't have to. And then he pulled me aside.
It was
He's like,
incredible.
I just don't like, these people we're just, the fans are so hard on Adrian. I'm like, you know what? I get it. And then he didn't come up again. Remember he was talking about standing on the sidelines and being able to see over big people. And I don't know where and I'm like, you know what? This is not. Yeah, this isn't. And I think Raiola knows himself well enough to know there's just not that much for him to impart to us. And he'll talk to us the one time, and I just, it's not going to be his fault if that offensive line's not very good. I mean, partially, but, what's he going to say? I don't want the job. I'm sorry. Of course he's going to take the job.
So if it's really good,
He deserves a lot of the credit.
he should get the credit.
Some of it, yeah. And I think Frost gets it, some of it. Because of all the hires, which was the risk?
Him. Yeah.
If you're the gambler. If you
I pointed at Evan for the
Congratulations
listening.
on that.
Actually, you're the one who plays blackjack like an idiot, right?
No, this is
Yes.
a miss. This oh my goodness,
Accurate.
misinformation spewed by Evan.
So if you do
No,
something you're
it's
not supposed to do in blackjack, what's
objectively
something
true.
he would do that you're not supposed to do?
He
You're gonna have me throw my hands up and walk away.
Okay.
there would be a bus card showing by the dealer, and Jimmy would hit on 12.
Okay.
Or 14.
If Jimmy does that and it all works out for Jimmy, then Jimmy gets a lot of the lion's share of the
I
credit.
get money. Yeah.
Frost would deserve a lion's share of the credit
You
if it works.
know, I've heard from many times my old friend Milt. By the way, the Arizona State game where I blamed a lot of it on Scott, Milt pulled me aside and said, "You bleeped up. That game was our fault." And I said, "Oh, really?" And he showed me what was going on with that game. I told Scott later that year, "Hey, Milt pulled me aside, told me I was a real idiot. Sorry about that." I did apologize to Frost, because I was too hard on him.
Did he
And,
forget?
He kind of I don't think he's ever gotten over it. Probably that's okay. But I mean that's fine. But no. But I just think that one thing that I learned from Milt was that if the people love to blame the offensive line for a sack or this or that, sometimes it's the fullback didn't go to the right place. The receivers missed a block. I really think this offensive line is going to need help, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're going to need Casey Thompson to be really good, and he has to avoid sacks. He has to get the ball out. They're going to need Mark Whipple to call plays that allow, don't have get the ball going, get sideways, whatever you got to do, and they're going to need a really good running back, because a good running back can make offensive line look good, and vice versa. But until they get their footing, they're going to need help early in the season, I think.
I want to make a point. You wrote the line about Oklahoma earlier this week. I don't know if you're leaving or if you're going to stay, right? Well, let's say you're going to stay. I don't know.
He's
I'll stay for a
unsure.
little bit.
I wanted to make one point about the Oklahoma game that you said was going to be so big.
Yeah.
September, what day is it?
17th.
September 17th,
Yeah.
2022. On September 20th, 1997, what happened? Scott Frost went to Washington.
I remember the game. I don't
25
remember the
years.
date.
25 years.
I remember it very well.
Yeah.
Open air press box. Great.
So
atmosphere.
25 years later, he may have a very, very similar moment. Only as a coach.
Well,
Sounds like a column idea, Tom.
that's thank you. That's that was kind of my point going into the season was we've seen Frost, the comeback kid, the chip on his shoulder. Nobody had a bigger chip on his shoulder ever than Scott Frost as a player. Where's that chip now? We need that chip to come back. And every one of these teams has beaten Nebraska. Some have beaten them every year. And, okay, is there any – and part of the thing is a lot of these guys are new that are going to play. They don't remember – they don't know about any of that stuff. But the guys that are returning – got to be a little red ass to get to Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin. It's time to beat them, right?
Yeah.
If you have Nebraska pride, and that's what Scott was supposed to bring back, this is a year to show it. Mm-hmm. So that Washington game was all about, Osborne he put in 2 plays, and boom, boom, he scored on them. But it was all about the chip on his shoulder attitude, and all his teammates talked about it. And so, I think, it's August. I always get fired up.
Good.
Somebody please stop me.
That means you
me
should
for
still be doing it
right now. I may just pass out, but I really feel like if things, but a lot of things have to fall in place. They have to catch a good break and just get kind of going. But we'll see.
How many can they win if they do that?
Let's do it.
How many can they win if they do that?
Oh, I'm winning toward 8.
Yeah.
I really am.
Yeah.
I kind of look at it like Northwestern. They have the most to lose. Like it feels like it can all go if they have a bad showing. But Oklahoma's the most to gain, right? If they would beat Northwestern nationally,
who cares?
People shrug.
Yeah.
Hey, cool, football's back. If they beat Oklahoma, that's going to get people's attention.
A lot of response on that, and people, the reaction was, first of all, it was you idiot, which I am. I am, but it's but it was like. Let's do one game at a time. We can't focus on Oklahoma. I'm a sports writer. I focus on the other games.
Yeah.
But my point is, if they lose that, I think they're going to win the first game. But if they lose it, people are going to say, season over, fire Frost, blah, blah, blah. It's over. Pack it in. I'm like going, no. This is going to take a few games to get where they want to be on offense. Oklahoma game can erase all the sins. It can, if you win that game, top 10 at home. People forget what this state is like when they win a big game at home.
Yeah. And they really have forgotten.
National TV,
We really have forgotten.
I mean, Michigan State that doesn't count.
Oregon
that's not
2016,
part of the deal.
probably.
Oregon 2016.
And it was big.
Yeah, it was
I was in the
pandemonium.
field when Armstrong led the comeback with the crowd. I mean, so if you beat Oklahoma. And then you get a week off. But then you get Indiana, Rutgers, Purdue. It's a jumping up. I really believe that. So nobody knows because it's been so long, and this program hasn't had confidence. It hasn't played with swagger. And I think that game can produce it. Northwestern can't.
I just think the kind of team that loses to Northwestern is not the kind of team that can then beat Oklahoma a month later. That's what I would say.
I understand what you're saying, but
they can.
5 years into this program, you got to be tougher than that. You can't fold after
Fair
one
point.
game.
Agreed.
You can't fold. 5 years into if you fold, okay, then we have our answer. But I don't think you will fold. And but they got. The X factor of this, Jimmy, is they've got these transfers who have won and understand winning, don't have a losing mentality. How are they going to rub off? I think that's going to be really interesting.
Let me present.
Great points.
Let me present one other observation from camp. I'm curious your guys' thoughts. So, as we know, Nebraska pass rush has been lacking, has been poor for a long time, and you can measure it in a lot of ways: sacks, QB pressures. Knockdowns, even things like that.
Purdue throwing the ball wherever they want last year. Yeah.
Right. So, again, there are a lot of ways to measure it. Here are Nebraska's ranking in terms of total team sacks.
Oh, boy.
Going back. Last year, they had 20. That tied for 101st nationally. Before that, 91st, 66th, 76th, 119th in 2017, 65th, 78th, 49th, 2013 was last time they had a good pass rush. They were 12th. That was Randy Gregory's junior year. So they add O'Shawn Mathis. We've all had a chance to see him. Garrett Nelson takes that step. Caleb Tanner comes back. Is this the best Nebraska pass rush since 2013? What do you guys think?
I should hope so, would be my answer. O'Shawn Mathis is the kind of... They haven't had a player like O'Shawn Mathis since 2013. I feel very confident saying that. And I think when you have a guy like that, I've been talking about this every time I get asked about the pass rush. When you have a guy like O'Shawn Mathis, he takes attention away from the other guys.
That's great.
O'Shawn Mathis is going to command double teams if he's what you think he is, and he looks the part, and that's going to help Garrett Nelson and Caleb Tanner.
How they use him, he might make the other guys all-stars. I totally agree.
Yes, the answer is yes. It should be.
And it'll help the linebackers. If the guys up front are taking up space, and we all know that, and it helps the secondary. I really like the defense, the way it's set up. And they aren't going to play, they're going to play some really good offenses, but they should be able to handle. I mean, I just boggled my mind yesterday, the Casey Thompson stats from last year, his 10 games, he really played well.
Yeah, he did.
But he didn't have any defense to speak of whatsoever. I mean, you lose to KU at home, and the final score is like 57-56. That should never happen this year.
No.
So I think that's a good sign. But, God, what day is it? We need a game, don't we?
Frost said it last week during his press conference. One of the more illuminating press conferences he has given, particularly in those like one-off Frost is the only one talking settings. The best thing about O'Shawn Mathis is that since he got there, Garrett Nelson, Caleb Tanner, Blaze Gunnerson, and Jamari Butler have all ascended. Frost said it. He tried to walk it back. Well, I don't know. Maybe they would have done that anyways. Maybe they would have. Not like that, though.
They're watching him.
That's everything. They see the way he prepares. Yeah. They see, he takes up blockers in practice, too, I'm sure. Yeah. They see the way he goes about his business, and they're like, oh, that's how you're supposed to do it? They're doing that.
He came off the other day. He came off like a pro. Talking to us.
Yeah.
He came off like a guy who's all business, all team, and you do things the right way all the time.
Coming from TCU, where there's not even near the same amount of media coverage.
He's a top 5 quote on the team.
But his head coach was down there was very good, and one of the best, especially on defense. I really like his approach. I think he will rub off on those other guys.
I think Casey Thompson is just as impressive.
Yeah,
totally. I don't think he's as good of a player, maybe as Mathis, but yeah. Like I think their pass rush will be better. I do. I think that can be expressed in sacks. That can be expressed in some other ways. But I do think they'll be better there. They probably won't have to bring 6 as much. Anytime you bring 6, you're asking a lot of the 5 covering. And if you bring 7, you're basically, if you don't get home, you're Iowa or Northwestern 2018. You cost you the game. So I think Nebraska will get better and better at not bringing pressure when they don't have to. I think that piece will be just fine. The question mark I'll have, although I don't know that it'll express itself in the first game, is what about the run? Like how do Mathis and Nelson and Tanner hold up on the line of scrimmage against a power run team that basically wants to pin them, right? Like, if you got a tackle who can turn Garrett Nelson, and then you can take that tight end, he can climb up and get a backer, and all of a sudden you're asking Miles Farmer or Marquise Buford or Omar Brown to come down in the alley and catch a back. That's what you're asking. That's the bigger concern for me. It's not what they're going to do against the pass. So that's where they've struggled in 2020 and 2011, 2020 and 2021. Especially against Illinois, is that. Like, teams are just getting around the corner, and there's not a lot left because the defensive lineman did not set a very good edge. So,
well guys, see. I've got to run. It's been great.
It has been great.
I just wanted to come in and say hi. So
we didn't get a chance. How often do we get to talk about Mike Cavanaugh?
We don't. Danny Langsdorf, Mark Banker.
Banker was great.
How many others can we name?
I don't know.
And they won 9 games.
They did. And they ran him out of there a year later.
Thank you, Tom. You're the best.
Bye, Tom.
Can I give a training camp observation that I know piqued Sam's interest because he gave me a significant eyebrow raise when I dictated it to him yesterday? Teddy Prohaska talking about Casey Thompson's pocket presence.
Yeah.
We always know where he's going to be. We've talked about it in this podcast last year about how Adrian Martinez, it's fun to watch him scramble around. It's fun to watch him run 70 yards or extend plays. It's hard on the offensive lineman.
It can be.
It can be.
Yep.
And Casey Thompson, is not that way. I mean, he can be. Again, at Texas, he did some of the running around and extending plays too. But Teddy says when they watch film, they know where they can use that film to apply it to the field, and we know where he's going to be. Even if they're not looking at him, they already have that. That's super important. I honestly just wanted to bring that up because I want Sam to talk about it.
Yeah, I think what offensive linemen want is the ability to know that a quarterback is going to, A, where they're going to be, and B, are they going to climb the pocket the right way? Because an offensive lineman wants to be able to have the option of running a guy off. A guy just runs around it, and okay, you want to take your your speed route out there, okay. I don't need to like lock onto you. I need to run you off because by the time you get to the quarterback, the ball is gone. Well, one of the challenges that I think you could sometimes see with Martinez is he would drop back so far that he dropped back into like a speed rush. He dropped back into a guy that was just taking a wide route, and you don't want to drop back that far. You want to be able to, and there's just other things. And this isn't a knock Adrian's session. He was tougher than any of us will ever be in terms of the way he played, and his toughness, and all the rest. At the end of the day, the record and the games and the performances and the turnovers speak for themselves. They speak for themselves. That you don't have to. You can just watch it and say, if that many things happened that many times, then you have your evidence, regardless of what happens at Kansas State. And he may be great there. I don't know. He'll have a better running back and he'll have a better run game. But I don't know. I think there was a frustration for many years there, just of how long it took him to throw the ball, and how long the routes had to show up, and where he was looking when he threw it. Just other things. I don't think the offensive line was as bad as we've made it out to be. We made it out to be bad because it's easy to knock anonymous players on the offensive line who don't talk to the media. And Pro Football Focus said so. Well, Pro Football Focus is not a defining authority on anything. So, that would be my take. And I think it's good. I think there's things that Casey does that quarterbacks generally tend to do that make him better than people expect. Challenge is he's going to win his teammates over.
Yeah.
That's my sense.
All right, last one, and I just want to get your guys' opinion on this. We didn't talk about this to this point. How much has the discussion around special teams affected things for you guys? Are you more of a believer, less of a believer, or is it still just straight up, got to see it?
Got to see it.
Got to see it, but I think there is a correlation between how bad Nebraska has been on special teams and how few resources they have invested in it. Obviously, this is the first year that they have a special teams coordinator. That it appears they're saying, and I tend to take people at face value in these settings, that's all you can really do, that it's made a difference. Bill Bush, you could even see him out there. Like, he is not just special teams coordinators can be sort of like anonymous, weird, quirky guys. Bill Bush is a weird, quirky guy, but he's not anonymous.
Not at all.
You're going to hear him on the practice field.
Like,
when we got
20
out,
minutes?
yeah, and we got out there yesterday when they were doing warm up. Come on, guys! It's Memorial Stadium. This is where we play. Come on, you got to get fired up out here. Like, he's a constant voice, and furthermore, I think the comments that he made about the other assistants not only encouraging their players to help him out on that unit, but Chenander coming up and asking him, "What can I do?" When in those special teams, you're like, "What should I be looking for?" That to me speaks to the more time you put into something, you're going to get better at it. That's a basic principle of anything, right? You shoot 100 jumpers every day, your jump shot's going to get better. You write stories all the time, you're going to become a better writer. You practice special teams more and with more vigor, might get better at special teams. Not saying they're going to be awesome, but the odds that they are going to be 128th or 129th at 130 teams, depending on your favorite special teams metric, I know we all have our opinions on that, I think that decreases. You inch up closer to double-digit rankings in there. A lot of it comes down to, like Sam said, you got to see it. Brian Bruscini has, you could argue, he's one of the most decorated FCS punters of all time. I don't know what the list is. Got to see it. Timmy Bleekrode, 16th in FCS field goal percentage last year. That's great. He's never kicked a high leverage field goal in a Power 5 stadium. He was talking about how he kicked at NC State last year. They lost that game 45-7. He kicked an extra point, and I didn't look, but they probably didn't go up 7-0. So
Yeah.
you got to see it to some degree.
I think they might have.
Okay, well,
He
it
missed
was
a field-
early then.
He missed a field goal.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like over the years I've learned, and I'm sure you guys have too. Like there are certain things that teams say that you sort of discount, or at least I do. Like this team's closer than ever before. If a player says that, I'm sure they believe it, but that's their experience because maybe they were freshmen before and now they have more of a
And
leadership
say that
role.
literally every year.
Or we're in the best shape of our lives, or the culture is really good. So yeah, that's kind of why I'm in a wait and see mode. I mean, I can think back to Nebraska preseasons where they named their special teams. Like I forget which one it was. One of them was the Bomb Squad, and one of them was all this other stuff. And they were excited, and then it didn't translate. So like,
Bomb Squad?
yeah, one of the core four was the Bomb Squad. They all had different like military themed names.
When was this?
2017, 2018 maybe.
Oh, yeah. Well, their special teams in 2017 were a hell of a lot better than the last 4 years.
Yeah,
They were. I mean, Bob Diaco did a good job. It was with the punting, with Caleb Lightbourne. He did. Like
Spielman had a touchdown return. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
They
the
had their
special
moments.
teams was I don't know like mid 50s. Last year they were 129th. This is the worst special teams unit they've ever had. Ever. They were 128th the year before, and that was bad. There's no excuse for what happened last year, other than it's good. We'll see if I got to see it, but it can't get worse. It can't. It just can't.
Well,
You would never have a punt returner do what Cam did in the first game.
Yeah.
That will never happen again. I've only seen 2 plays in Nebraska football history. The one where David Santos thought it was a good idea to bat the ball at Fresno State into the end zone on a punt return, which caused a safety, and whatever Cam was trying to do on that one play. Those are the only 2 I've ever seen. So it's the chances of it happening are like a once every 7-year event.
Yeah.
So that part won't happen. You only get a punt blocked about once every 2 or 3 years, where literally a guy misses somebody. He doesn't block him. Unbelievable.
Well, it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
We're going to be back next week. Yes, we'll be back next week
Yeah, we'll be back.
for another pod, and then Sam, you're gonna
I'm ready to go to Ireland.
you're gonna get jet over to
I'm ready.
Ireland.
I'm ready to get this season going.
We've reached that point.
Yeah.
Yes, we've definitely reached that.
I'm being
point.
honest. I'm ready to go. I'm not because it's like, oh, I'm going to Ireland. I'm ready for this is time to go.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this team for a while, and it's just ready to. I'm sure that Nebraska would wish upon every wish in their heart to not have to go to Ireland to do this, but they have to. There you
That'll
go.
be a good topic for a future pod. It's time for them to go. It's time for us to go. Thanks for listening. For Jimmy, for Sam, I'm Evan.